Camilla Sharp sat on the edge of the taxi, looking out at the vast ocean that stretched endlessly ahead. Her heart beat a little faster as she gazed at the sleek, towering cruise ship docked in the harbor. It was supposed to be a celebratory cruise, her 35th birthday, but the excitement she had expected felt distant. Her hands were clammy, her mind wrapped in frustration. This was supposed to be her escape, but how could she escape from a life that was suffocating her at every turn? Her father, Victor Sharp, controlled everything. His shadow loomed over every decision she made, even if she wasn't physically in his presence. It was his money, his expectations, and his unyielding grasp on every part of her life that had gotten her to this point. This cruise, this attempt at freedom, felt like a fleeting dream, one that would surely slip through her fingers as soon as she returned home. The taxi driver spoke to her, but she was too lost in thought to respond, only nodding as he let her out at the terminal. Camilla stared at the towering ship before her, a symbol of wealth and perfection. It looked like a dream, but it felt like a prison. She had always been the youngest, the forgotten one, the one everyone underestimated. Her siblings? They followed the rules. They blended in. But not her, no, she was always seen as the rebellious one. That feeling of being trapped, expected to be something she wasn't, had only grown more suffocating as the years had passed. As Camilla walked onto the ship, the luxury around her only deepened her sense of disconnection. The polished floors gleamed beneath her feet, and the sparkling chandeliers overhead only added to the sense of being out of place. She could feel her father's expectations hanging over her, suffocating her in this perfect, pristine world. But as she stood in the grand lobby of the ship, her mind kept drifting to the most recent interaction with her father. He had called her earlier in the week to remind her of her duties within the family, but Camilla had heard it all before. It was always about the family name, the family business. She was a part of the machine, a cog that was expected to keep turning without question. But she was tired, so tired of it all. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a voice. "Welcome aboard, miss. Your cabin is ready whenever you are." The attendant's polite voice barely registered as she forced a smile, nodding absently. She had made her decision. This cruise was her escape, a brief reprieve from the weight of her father's control. For just a few days, she would allow herself to believe that she could be free. The dining room was a stark contrast to the sterile corridors of the ship. The golden tones of the room, the flickering candlelight, and the hushed hum of conversations created a soothing atmosphere. It was a world Camilla had always envied, a world that felt just out of her reach. She took a seat by the window, staring out at the endless water beyond. The tension in her chest slowly started to ease. A waiter appeared, his steps light and his uniform impeccable. He smiled politely as he set down a glass of wine in front of her. "Would you care for some wine, miss?" he asked, his voice smooth and professional. Camilla glanced at the glass and nodded, grateful for the distraction. As the waiter handed her a napkin, he leaned in slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Don't drink that wine." Camilla froze. For a brief moment, she wondered if she had heard him correctly. She looked up at him, expecting to see some trace of humor or playfulness, but his face remained serious, almost anxious. At first, she laughed it off, assuming it was a joke. "What's the matter?" "Bad batch," she said, trying to defuse the strange tension building between them. The waiter didn't laugh. His eyes flickered nervously over his shoulder, as though checking for someone or something. Then, just as quickly as he had spoken, he was gone, disappearing into the crowd of servers without a word. Camilla sat back in her chair, her fingers lightly brushing the edge of the wine glass. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the interaction. "He's probably just stressed," she muttered under her breath. It was a nice ship, after all, and the staff was likely under constant pressure to maintain the image of perfection. But there was something about his tone, something in his eyes that made her question if this was just a coincidence. She had learned over the years to trust her instincts, to sense when things weren't right. As she turned the glass in her hand, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in her stomach. Was it just paranoia? Or was there something more sinister lurking beneath the surface of this perfect facade? David, the waiter, was nowhere to be seen, and Camilla told herself to relax. She had made her decision to go on this cruise to escape the chaos of her life, but could she really do that? Her mind kept circling back to her family, to the tight grip they had on her, to the fact that every move she made was either scrutinized or ignored. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking in the tranquil surroundings. Maybe she was just tired. The wine had probably just gone straight to her head. But then, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Pulling it out, she glanced at the screen. It was a text from Marcus Fields, her lawyer. His message was brief, yet it sent a chill down her spine. "I think I have what we need. Be careful, Camilla. Victor is making moves. You might want to act fast." The message was like a bucket of cold water splashing over her. She had known things were bad with her father, but this was something else entirely. She stood up abruptly, her heart hammering in her chest. She couldn't sit here anymore, pretending that everything was fine. Just as she was about to leave, her vision blurred, and a sharp pain shot through her head. She staggered, gripping the edge of the table to steady herself. The room seemed to tilt, and her legs threatened to give way beneath her. But when she looked up, her eyes locked on the figure of David, who was standing by the door, watching her with an unreadable expression. This time, his gaze wasn't polite, it was desperate, almost pleading. The world around her began to spin. Panic surged through her veins, and she stumbled towards the door, fighting to stay conscious. But before she could reach it, everything went dark. The dizziness Camilla had been feeling earlier was intensifying. It wasn't just the wine anymore, it was something deeper, something that gnawed at the edges of her mind. She stared out over the sea through the large window of the dining room, the waves crashing gently against the hull of the ship, a soft, rhythmic sound that should have been soothing. Yet, her body felt heavy, as if something was wrong. The wine hadn't been strong enough to make her feel this unsteady, and she couldn't shake the feeling that it had all begun with the waiter's warning. She had brushed it off at first, convinced that it was just a mistake, some minor lapse in judgment on his part. But now, as the nausea swirled in her stomach, Camilla was beginning to question whether she had been too quick to dismiss his words. "Don't drink that wine." She heard the voice in her head again, clearer this time, and the weight of the warning felt much heavier now than it had when he first said it. Camilla glanced around the room. The passengers, mostly couples, families, and a few solitary travelers, seemed oblivious to the oddity of the moment. There was laughter at the table next to hers, a soft clinking of glasses, and the waiters moved gracefully between the tables, offering their flawless service. They were all playing their parts, smiling, laughing, talking, just like they were supposed to. But something in the air felt thick, as if everyone was pretending that nothing was wrong, pretending that all was well. She swallowed hard, trying to shake the unease from her chest, but it didn't work. The feeling of being trapped, of being watched, gnawed at her. For years, she had lived under the shadow of her father's influence, always kept in the background while he manipulated everything around him, always the obedient daughter, the perfect child. It made sense that now, here, in this moment of supposed freedom, she would feel the lingering grasp of his control. It wasn't just her father's gaze that haunted her, it was the web of influence he had spun around her life. He had made sure she would never have the chance to step out from beneath his thumb. Her thoughts drifted back to her earlier conversation with him, the call she had received just before boarding the ship. His voice, smooth and commanding, reminding her of her place in the family, in the world. And yet, here she was, trying to escape. A small part of her hoped that somehow, this cruise would be the answer. That the sea, the distance, would allow her to breathe. But that hope now felt distant, slipping through her fingers with every passing moment. With a slight tremor in her hands, she reached for the wine glass, taking a tentative sip. The cold liquid slid down her throat, and for a second, everything felt fine. But then, the sensation of dizziness hit her again. This time, it was more pronounced, more urgent. She gripped the edge of the table to steady herself, her heart pounding in her chest. Something wasn't right. The waiter's warning echoed in her mind again, and Camilla's gaze flicked to the door. She needed to find David. She needed answers, and the oddness of the situation, the sensation of being watched, made her realize that the world around her was no longer as simple as it seemed. Her feet felt heavy as she pushed herself from the table. The room spun a little as she stood, but she managed to steady herself. As she walked through the dining room, she tried to keep her focus, but her mind was racing. She didn't know if David's warning was something real or if her own paranoia was getting the best of her. But one thing was certain, she couldn't ignore the sinking feeling that something dangerous was unfolding right under her nose. Camilla found him near the kitchen doors, standing with his back to her. The air was thick with the smell of freshly baked bread and rich sauces, but her stomach churned. She approached quietly, not sure of what she was going to say. "David," she called softly. He turned sharply, his eyes widening with recognition. The moment his gaze locked with hers, the tension in his face was palpable. Something was wrong. His usual calm, professional demeanor was replaced with nervousness. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Why did you warn me?" Her voice was low, but it carried the weight of her frustration. David swallowed hard. For a moment, he seemed unsure of how to respond. I don't know how to explain it," he said, his voice trembling. "But you need to leave the ship. Now." Camilla narrowed her eyes, suspicion creeping in. "What do you mean? What's going on?" He hesitated again, glancing nervously over his shoulder before leaning in. His voice was barely audible. "Someone's been tracking you. Someone from the crew. I don't know who it is, but you're being watched." He paused, his eyes flicking to the side again. "Please, just leave. Go back to your cabin, lock the door, and don't come out until the cruise is over. It's not safe." The warning was clear, but so was the fear in his eyes. Camilla wanted to trust him, but 1,000 questions swirled in her mind. Was this real? Or was he somehow involved in whatever was going on? Before she could ask more, a figure appeared in the hallway behind David. He saw them, his eyes widening in alarm. Without another word, he turned and backed away, his face a mixture of fear and desperation. Camilla stood frozen, her heart pounding. The cryptic warning, the strange behavior, it all pointed to something deeper, something sinister. But who was behind it? And why her? As David retreated into the shadows, Camilla's hand instinctively reached for her phone. She didn't know if she could trust him, but she had to try to make sense of it all. Her finger hovered over the screen, and then it buzzed. She looked down at the message. It was from Marcus Fields, her lawyer, the only person she could trust. "Camilla, I think I have what we need. But you need to be careful. Victor's interest in you on this cruise is more than it seems. You're in danger." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Her father, Victor. The connection clicked in her mind. This wasn't just a random event, it was tied to him. Everything was connected. And whatever was happening on this ship was part of something much larger, something that would shape the rest of her life. Camilla didn't hesitate. She could feel her pulse quicken as she started walking towards the nearest exit, her mind racing with possibilities. But before she could reach the door, a hand shot out from behind her. The grip on her wrist was firm, unyielding. She spun around, her eyes wide, but all she saw was a shadowy figure whose face she barely glimpsed. "Stop asking questions," the figure hissed. "You have no idea what you're getting into." She struggled to free herself, but the grip tightened. She could feel the cold metal of a ring on the person's hand digging into her wrist. The figure yanked her forward, and just as quickly, they let go, disappearing into the crowd. Her breath came in short gasps as she turned to look in the direction they had gone, but the figure was gone. She couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in around her. Someone was watching her. Someone was waiting. The message was clear: she wasn't in control anymore. Camilla's eyes fluttered open the next morning, her head pounding and a lingering fog of dizziness clouding her thoughts. The soft hum of the ship's engine beneath her seemed distant, a vague reminder of where she was. She could still taste the remnants of the wine on her tongue and the lingering sense of unease from the previous night. The warning from the waiter, David, echoed in her mind. "Don't drink that wine." It was like an alarm, ringing louder now as she tried to piece together what had happened. She sat up in bed, rubbing her temples, trying to shake the fog from her mind. What was real? Was it paranoia? Or had she truly been poisoned? Her fingers gripped the edge of the bed, her thoughts racing. The unease from the night before wasn't just a product of the wine. It was something deeper, something more sinister. Her family. Victor, her father. The ever-present shadow he cast over her life. She hadn't wanted to admit it, but she knew now, this wasn't just a random incident. This was connected to them. To her father's business dealings. To the control he'd held over her life for years. She could feel the tendrils of his influence creeping up on her, tightening, even here, far away from his reach. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became: this was no coincidence. Victor had always manipulated her, kept her in line with his promises, his expectations, his financial power. But now, something was wrong. Deeply wrong. Her mind flashed back to the conversation with Marcus, her lawyer and friend, who had hinted at something much larger at play. Financial irregularities. The family's business dealings with dangerous individuals. She hadn't been ready to confront that truth then, but now she could feel the weight of it pressing down on her chest. David's warning was starting to make sense. But if she was being watched, if someone was after her, then who could she trust? The ship was full of strangers, faces she would never see again, but were they all strangers? The dizziness still hadn't fully passed, but Camilla knew she had to act. The sense of urgency was growing, and she needed answers. Fast. Camilla made her way to the small cabin's bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. The mirror in front of her reflected a woman she barely recognized. Tired eyes, pale skin, the weight of the world pulling her down. But underneath the exhaustion, there was something else, a fire, a determination. She was done hiding. Done being controlled. After a few moments of staring at her reflection, she grabbed her phone and quickly dialed Marcus. It rang twice before he picked up. "Marcus," she said, her voice low but steady. "We need to talk." "I was just about to call you," Marcus responded, his voice filled with concern. "Are you okay?" "I've been trying to reach you. I'm tracking something important about your father's business. It's dangerous." Her breath caught in her throat. The wine. It wasn't just a coincidence, was it? Someone's trying to warn me. To silence me. "I know," Marcus said, his voice serious. I've been looking into your father's financials. There's a lot more at stake than you realize. I need you to stay on that ship. There's something happening here that's bigger than we thought. People who want you gone. Your father's influence reaches far, Camilla. Camilla's heart raced, but she didn't let the fear show. So, what am I supposed to do? Just stay here while they try to kill me? Not kill you, but they'll do whatever it takes to stop you from uncovering the truth, Marcus said. Camilla, you're at the center of this. They know you're looking for answers, and they'll do everything to keep you from finding them. But you're not alone. There are people who want to help you. Her mind raced. Who could she trust? Who was lying? David. The waiter. He warned me last night. He said someone was tracking me. David, Marcus repeated, his voice turning darker. He's involved, but there's something off about him. He might be helping you, but he's not telling you everything. Be careful, Camilla. The words hung in the air between them, and for the first time since boarding the ship, Camilla felt the heavy weight of the truth settling around her like a cloak. Her family's sins ran deeper than she'd ever imagined, and now she was tangled in a web she couldn't escape. She wasn't just caught in her father's control anymore, she was in the middle of a dangerous game, and she didn't know who to trust. I need to meet you, Camilla said. Somewhere off the radar. Can you do that? Yes. I'll send you the location, Marcus replied. But be careful. Don't trust anyone, Camilla. Not anyone on that ship. The ship continued to glide through the sea, the endless horizon before her. But as Camilla walked through the corridors, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Her every step seemed to echo in the silent hallways, each corner turning darker than the last. She felt the weight of her father's world pressing down on her shoulders, and the realization hit her hard, she was just another pawn in a game she didn't understand. As she moved toward the secluded meeting spot Marcus had mentioned, a figure stepped out from behind a door. She froze. It was David, standing in the shadows, his eyes darting nervously as he took in her presence. I told you to leave, David said, his voice low, urgent. They know you're getting too close. You need to stop asking questions. They'll hurt you if you don't. Camilla felt a chill run down her spine. The warning, so similar to the one he'd given her last night, echoed in her mind. But this time, there was no laughter, no joking tone. David was serious. And she knew he wasn't just talking about the crew or the passengers. He was talking about her family, about the dangerous men who controlled her father's empire. You know more than you're telling me, David, she said, her voice steady despite the growing fear inside her. What's really going on here? David looked around frantically, and Camilla's gaze followed his. Someone was watching them. Without another word, David grabbed her wrist and pulled her into the nearest room, away from prying eyes. He closed the door behind them with a soft click. You're in danger, Camilla, he whispered. And I'm trying to help you, but you don't understand the forces you're up against. Your father, he's not the only one pulling the strings here. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Camilla's heart skipped a beat. Who else was involved? Before she could speak, a loud crash interrupted the conversation. Something heavy fell in the hallway, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps. David's face went pale. They know we're onto them. Who? Camilla demanded, her voice rising. But before he could answer, a shadowy figure appeared in the doorway, blocking their only escape route. David's eyes widened in fear. Go, he hissed. Run. Camilla turned, her breath catching in her throat, and bolted for the back exit. As she raced down the corridor, the sound of footsteps behind her grew louder. Whoever was after her was closing in. The web had tightened, and now there was no escape. Camilla paced back and forth in her cabin, her mind racing with thoughts. Her heart was pounding, and she could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her chest. She had come to a realization: she couldn't keep running. The warning from David, the confrontation with her father, the cryptic messages from Marcus, it was all adding up, and she could no longer ignore it. The wine, the strange behavior of the crew, her father's hidden life, it wasn't just paranoia. Something was happening. Someone was after her, and it had everything to do with the web of deceit her family had woven. But where did she stand in all this? Camilla knew she couldn't sit idly by anymore, pretending she didn't see what was unfolding before her eyes. She had to confront her father. It was the only way to reclaim her life, to free herself from the grip he had on her. But there was a deep-seated fear gnawing at her. Victor Sharp, her father, was no ordinary man. He had a way of twisting the truth, manipulating those around him into submission. And she had been his pawn for far too long. How would she stand up to him? How could she confront the man who had controlled every aspect of her life for as long as she could remember? The truth was, she was terrified. But her fear was no longer enough to stop her. The danger was too real now, and the clock was ticking. She couldn't afford to wait any longer. Her plan was simple: confront her father, get the truth, and finally take control of her destiny. But it was easier said than done. She had to choose her words carefully, avoid showing any weakness, and most importantly, not let him see how vulnerable she really felt. As she finished preparing herself, she took a deep breath. She could do this. The plan was set. She was ready. The room where she would meet Victor was just as grand and imposing as she remembered. The polished wood of the table gleamed under the soft lighting, and the luxurious curtains billowed slightly in the air-conditioned breeze. It was a room meant to impress, meant to intimidate, and for years, it had done just that. But not anymore. Camilla was no longer the scared little girl who had obeyed her father's every word. She was a woman, and she was done hiding in the shadows. Victor was already sitting at the table when she walked in, his eyes trained on her with that same calculating look he had always had. He didn't stand up, didn't offer a greeting, just a silent acknowledgement of her presence. Camilla stood still for a moment, letting the silence stretch between them, before she spoke. "I'm done being your pawn, father," she said, her voice steady but firm. "I know about the business. The lies. The manipulation. The people you've been working with." Victor's expression didn't change. He simply narrowed his eyes, and for a moment, Camilla wondered if she had made a mistake. "You don't know what you're talking about," he replied, his voice cold, devoid of emotion. "You've always had a tendency to overthink things, Camilla. It's a weakness." "No," she retorted, stepping forward, "it's the truth. I know about the shady deals you've made, the money you've funneled into your accounts, and the way you've used your family. You're not just a businessman, you're a criminal." Victor's gaze flickered for a brief second, but he quickly regained his composure. He leaned back in his chair and folded his arms, a smug smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "You think you know everything, don't you? But you don't, Camilla. You never have." Her stomach churned, but she didn't flinch. "You've been controlling me for years, but not anymore. I'm not going to sit back and let you ruin more lives. Not mine, not Marcus's, and certainly not David's." The mention of David's name made Victor's eyes harden. His fingers clenched into fists on the table. "That waiter? You think he's someone you can trust? He's a fool, Camilla. Nothing more than a pawn, just like you. She shook her head, her pulse racing. You're wrong. He's been trying to warn me. He's not like you. He's not part of your world. He wants to take you down, just like I do. For a moment, Victor's mask slipped, and she saw the slightest crack in his armor. It was brief, but it was there, a flash of fear, of uncertainty. But before she could press further, he recovered, and his face returned to its usual, calculated calm. You don't know anything about this world, Camilla. You've never understood the things I've had to do to protect this family, Victor said, his voice turning icy. You think you can just expose everything and walk away unscathed? You have no idea what kind of people you're dealing with. Camilla took a step back, the words sinking in. You're right about one thing, she said. I don't know what kind of people I'm dealing with. But I'm going to find out. And when I do, you won't be able to hide behind your power or your lies anymore. Victor leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. You're playing a dangerous game, Camilla. You're walking into something far darker than you can imagine. And when the truth comes to light, you'll regret this moment. Her heart hammered in her chest, but she held his gaze. I'm not afraid of the truth, Father. I'm afraid of the lies. Victor's lips twisted into a knowing smile. We'll see how long that courage lasts, my dear. As Camilla left the room, her thoughts were spinning. The confrontation had gone as well as she could have hoped, but the weight of what had just transpired was heavy on her shoulders. Her father had acknowledged her suspicions but had done so in a way that twisted everything into a game of control. She had expected that, of course. Victor never gave up power easily. But there was something more to it, something she hadn't anticipated. Her father's demeanor had shifted ever so slightly when she mentioned David, as though she had struck a nerve. That made her wonder, was David really a part of her father's world? Or was there more to him than she'd realized? Her mind was spinning, trying to connect all the dots. But the questions only led to more questions, and the weight of her next move hung heavily over her. She couldn't trust her father, but could she trust Marcus? Could she trust David? And more importantly, could she trust herself? The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain, she had crossed a line. There was no going back now. Just as Camilla was about to leave the corridor, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Her hand trembled as she opened it, her eyes scanning the encrypted message. Stay silent. You have no idea what you're getting into. The message contained a link, which she clicked. The file that opened revealed something that shook her to the core, a deeper conspiracy involving her father, one that tied her family's wealth to more than just illegal transactions. The scope of it all was beyond anything she had ever imagined. Suddenly, she was back where she started, alone, uncertain, and terrified. The conspiracy was deeper than she had thought, and the people involved were far more dangerous than she'd realized. Her phone buzzed again, but this time it was a call from Marcus. Camilla, he said, his voice tight, you need to leave the ship now. They know you're on to them. Cliffhanger, Camilla's heart raced. She had just begun to understand what was at stake, but now, she was at a crossroads. Should she leave, or should she stay and fight? The choice was hers, but the consequences would be far-reaching. Camilla couldn't believe her eyes when she saw Evelyn standing in front of her at the family event. Her sister, who had been avoiding her for weeks, was now standing right before her, a forced smile on her face as she tried to avoid eye contact. The room was filled with chatter and clinking glasses, but it felt like an oppressive silence had settled between them. Camilla had barely processed her last conversation with her father when she realized she couldn't let this moment slip by. Evelyn, she said, stepping forward. We need to talk. Evelyn froze for a moment, then shifted uncomfortably. I don't think now's the right time, Camilla, she replied, her voice strained. Everyone's here, Anne. No, Camilla cut her off, her voice firm. We're going to talk now. You've been avoiding me for too long. I want to know why. Evelyn's eyes darted nervously around the room, and Camilla could see the unease in her posture. Her sister was a picture of discomfort, someone who was trying to maintain the facade of a perfect life, but it was cracking, just like everything else in their world. I can't do this here, Evelyn said softly, but her refusal only fueled Camilla's anger. Evelyn, stop pretending. I know there's something going on. You've been acting strange ever since I started digging into Dad's business. You owe me an explanation. Finally, Evelyn sighed and lowered her gaze. I never wanted you to know, Camilla. I didn't want you involved in this mess. What mess? Camilla asked, her voice cold now, the frustration building. Is it the mess of lies, deceit, and manipulation that you've been part of your entire life? Evelyn looked up, her face flushed. Camilla, please. I've done what I had to. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. Father, he doesn't give you a choice. You have to comply, or you're out. He's made sure of that. I'm not asking for excuses, Camilla shot back, her eyes narrowing. I'm asking for the truth. You've been working with him, haven't you? You've been helping him cover up his dirty dealings. Evelyn hesitated, her face shifting with guilt. She opened her mouth to speak, but it was as though the words were stuck. Finally, she exhaled sharply, her voice barely a whisper. Yes. I've been helping him. I didn't want to, but he made it clear that if I didn't, I'd be discarded, just like you were. The blow hit harder than Camilla had expected. Her sister, the person she had always turned to, the one she had trusted above all others, had been just as deep in the web of lies as their father. But that's not all, is it? Camilla pressed, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. You're not just helping him. You've been feeding him information about me. About everything I've been trying to uncover. Why? Evelyn flinched. Camilla, I didn't want it to be like this. I wanted to protect the family. I didn't know what else to do. Camilla's heart pounded in her chest as she took a step back. The betrayal ran deeper than she could have ever imagined. Protect the family? You've been protecting yourself. And in doing so, you've allowed him to destroy everything I've been trying to build. I'm sorry, Evelyn whispered, but the apology felt hollow, like she wasn't truly sorry at all. Just when Camilla thought the conversation might end in silence, Evelyn's words hit like a cold splash of water. I've been collecting evidence, Camilla, she admitted. Not to expose him, but to use it as leverage. I thought I could keep it to myself, control it, and eventually use it against him if it came to that. Camilla's stomach churned. You've been playing both sides. You've been lying to me all along. Evelyn lowered her head, defeated. I didn't want to, but it was the only way to survive. If you knew what I was up against, you'd understand. No, Camilla whispered, feeling a rush of emotions she couldn't control. I wouldn't understand. Because you've become just as corrupt as he is. As Evelyn stood there, her head bowed in shame, Camilla felt a deep sense of loss. Her sister had been complicit in everything, just like the rest of the family. And now, as the truth about Evelyn's actions settled in, Camilla's trust in everyone around her began to erode completely. Later that evening, Camilla received a message from Marcus. His tone was urgent, unlike anything she had heard before. Camilla, you need to meet me. Now. I've uncovered something that changes everything. Her heart raced as she dialed his number, anxiety creeping up her spine. What could be so urgent? What could possibly be worse than what she had already learned today? I've found something crucial, Marcus said when he answered. There's a financial document that Victor has been hiding. It's locked in a safe at the estate. If you can get your hands on it, it could expose everything, his crimes, the people he's involved with. But you'll have to do it alone. Camilla felt the weight of the decision hit her like a ton of bricks. The document could be the key to ending her father's reign of terror, but getting it meant risking everything. She wasn't sure what to do. Could she trust Marcus? Could she trust anyone? But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she had no choice. If she didn't act now, she would be swept further into this dangerous game that she had no control over. Marcus's voice cut through her thoughts. Camilla, there's one more thing. Someone's been watching you. The walls are closing in faster than you think. Fear gripped her chest. The danger wasn't just looming, it was closing in on her faster than she could process. With one final deep breath, Camilla made up her mind. She couldn't turn back now. As she prepared to take action, another text came through. The message was from an anonymous source. Her eyes scanned the cryptic words, and her stomach dropped. Don't do it. Stay silent, or you'll regret it. The warning hit her like a punch to the gut. She felt cornered, trapped in a world where no one could be trusted, where every move she made would lead to a new betrayal. And now, with the document in her grasp, the stakes had never been higher. With her heart pounding, Camilla made her decision. She would confront the truth, no matter the cost. But as she stood on the precipice, ready to expose everything, she heard a loud crash downstairs. The situation had just escalated. Camilla's breath came in short bursts as she darted through the narrow corridors of the estate, her heart pounding in her chest. Every footstep seemed louder than the last, echoing in her ears. She had grabbed the document, but it felt like her actions had only put her deeper in the crosshairs of a deadly game. The house behind her was dark, the flickering lights reflecting the chaos unfolding. A loud crash rang out downstairs, followed by frantic footsteps. She couldn't stop. She had to keep moving. Her fingers trembled as she pushed through the back door into the cold night. The sound of her boots hitting the pavement sent a jolt of panic through her. But when she turned the corner, hoping to lose herself in the night, her breath caught. There, standing under the dim streetlight, was Marcus. For a moment, her heart skipped a beat. She trusted him, relied on him, but now, standing face to face with him, something felt off. The familiar warmth she once saw in his eyes was gone, replaced by something colder, more calculated. Camilla's stomach turned. You shouldn't have taken the document, Camilla, Marcus said, his voice low and cold. He stepped forward, blocking her way. It's more than just a piece of paper now. You've sealed your fate. Her mind raced. What the hell are you talking about, Marcus? She spat. I did what I had to do. You were supposed to help me. What are you doing here? He didn't respond right away, his gaze flicking to the shadows, as if expecting someone to jump out from behind them. Camilla's pulse quickened. Something wasn't right. She took a step back, clutching the document tightly in her hand. You don't understand, he said finally, his voice laced with a grim finality. I've been keeping tabs on you. I've been watching you. But it's not to help you, Camilla. It's to make sure you don't ruin everything. I've been securing the family's interests, even if it means betraying you. Her knees nearly buckled under the weight of his words. Betrayal. She had expected it from her father, but not from Marcus. He was supposed to be her ally, her only real chance at taking down her father's empire. Why? She whispered, the word leaving her lips before she could stop it. Marcus's eyes softened, but only for a moment. Because I'm doing this for me, too. I need my own piece of the pie. I've been stuck in this game for too long, playing a role I never signed up for. But I'm not going down with you. Camilla's mind reeled, trying to make sense of the words. Her body trembled as the reality of her situation set in. She was alone, truly alone. Everyone around her had their own agenda. Even Marcus, the one person she thought she could trust, had betrayed her. Suddenly, a noise echoed from the driveway. Camilla spun around to see a car pulling up, her father's car, unmistakable even in the dim light. And with it, the man who had haunted her life for years, Victor Sharp, her father. He stepped out of the car with a calculated, predatory gaze, followed by a tall bodyguard she didn't recognize. The bodyguard's eyes scanned the area, alert and tense. Camilla's heart skipped a beat. Shit, she muttered under her breath. Marcus stepped back, the coldness in his eyes growing stronger. It's too late, Camilla. You're not getting out of this. Why did you have to be part of this? She snapped, her voice shaking with anger. She didn't want to hear him explain anymore. She just wanted out, wanted to run. Before she could react, the bodyguard's eyes locked onto her. He'd spotted her. It was only a matter of seconds before they would close in. She turned, desperate to make her escape, but Marcus caught her arm, his grip surprisingly firm. Go! Marcus urged, his voice sharper now. You have no choice but to run. I can't help you anymore. She yanked her arm away from him, the cold realization settling in. She didn't need his help. She needed to make her own way. She turned and bolted down the narrow path that led to the trees, her heart thundering in her chest. But the pursuit had begun. The night air was biting as Camilla rushed down the winding road, the sound of tires screeching behind her. Her mind raced faster than her feet, each step carrying her further from the people who had once been her family. Her father, Marcus, even David, they were all in on it. They were all pieces of the same corrupt machine. She couldn't trust anyone. But there was one thing she could trust, her own determination. She had made a decision, and she wasn't turning back now. The road twisted and turned, but there was no escape. The headlights of her father's car were in the distance, and she knew they wouldn't stop chasing her. Her only hope was to outrun them, to get to the place where she could find safety, at least long enough to figure out what to do next. Suddenly, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from Marcus, but the message only added to her confusion. Camilla, I warned you. You don't understand what's happening. It's too late now. Too late? Camilla muttered, her voice catching in her throat. She couldn't keep up with the game they were playing. All she could do now was keep running. As she took another turn, she spotted the sign for a secluded road that led to a small off-the-grid property. She'd heard about it through Evelyn, the place where the lawyer, the one person who could help them, had arranged for them to hide. It was their last chance. Her car screeched to a halt in front of the gate. She jumped out and rushed toward the small cabin, the feeling of being hunted only intensifying with every second. As she reached the door, her hand froze on the handle. Something wasn't right. The window was broken. There were signs of movement inside. She hesitated, fear gripping her chest. They've been here, she whispered to herself. The safe house was compromised. Her mind raced. The plan had fallen apart, but she wasn't done yet. She had to think on her feet. Her only option now was to contact the journalist. She had to expose everything before they could silence her. But just as she reached for her phone, the front door swung open, and Evelyn stepped out. "Camilla, we need to talk," she said, her voice strained. Behind Evelyn, the cabin was ransacked, papers, files, and documents scattered all over the floor. Camilla's heart sank. "Evelyn, what happened?" "The lawyer's office. They've been here, too," Evelyn whispered, her face pale. "I'm sorry, Camilla." But before she could finish, a crash echoed from outside. The sound of footsteps. And then, the unmistakable voice of her father. "Camilla," Victor called from the shadows. "You're not getting away. Not now. Not ever." Camilla stepped into the lawyer's office, her heart heavy with the weight of the situation. She hadn't expected it to be easy, but she had hoped, needed, this to be the turning point. The documents inside this office were supposed to be the final piece of the puzzle that would bring her father's empire to its knees. But as soon as she walked in, something felt wrong. The usual tidy, organized space was a mess. Papers were scattered across the floor, and the desk drawer was left wide open. "Someone's been here," she muttered, her breath caught in her throat. Evelyn, standing behind her, ran her fingers across the edge of the desk. "It's all gone wrong," she whispered, eyes wide with shock. The unease in her voice mirrored Camilla's own. The lawyer had been their last hope, and now his office had been compromised. They hurriedly started sifting through the disorganized papers. Camilla's heart raced as she rifled through file after file. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she knew it was here. Then, she found it. A drawer slightly pulled out, just enough for her to catch a glimpse of something familiar. She pulled it open and froze. There they were. Documents with her father's name. But not just any papers, these were connected to financial transactions, the kind that no legitimate businessman would ever want on display. Money laundering. Off-the-book stealings. Her father's criminal network laid bare before her eyes. Her stomach dropped. This was what she needed, but this was also the moment when she realized how deep the lies went. There was no turning back. "We have to get these out of here," Camilla said, grabbing the folder and stuffing it into her bag. Evelyn stood frozen, her gaze fixed on the papers. "Camilla, I don't know if I can keep doing this." Her voice cracked, and Camilla knew she had reached a breaking point. "What do you mean?" Camilla snapped, feeling frustration building up. "We're so close." "I know," Evelyn said quietly, "but it's not just about these papers. It's about everything. The lies we've lived with. The guilt I carry for not saying anything before." She swallowed hard. "You don't know what it's like to be in this family, to be caught in the middle of it all. I've been trying to protect myself. And you. But the truth is, I've been living a lie for so long." Camilla stood still, absorbing her sister's words. She had always known there was a rift, but hearing it out loud, hearing how deeply Evelyn had been entrenched in the same corrupt world she had fought so hard to escape, it hurt more than she expected. "You've known?" Camilla's voice was low, almost a whisper. "How deep does this go, Evelyn?" Evelyn's eyes welled up. "I knew about the illegal deals. I knew about the people he was involved with. I've kept quiet because I didn't want to lose everything. But now it's too much. I can't keep hiding." A heavy silence fell between them. Camilla felt the anger rise within her. "And now you want me to do the dirty work? To expose everything while you've been part of it all along?" Evelyn flinched at her words, but she stood her ground. I wasn't always like this, Camilla. You think I wanted to be a part of it? No. But I've been talking to the police, and they've been keeping tabs on Dad for months. They need the evidence to act. Without it, they can't do anything. I was trying to protect you, but you have to understand, this isn't just about you and me anymore. It's about bringing him down. Camilla's anger began to subside as Evelyn's words sank in. The police, she echoed. But we don't have enough evidence. Not yet. We do, Evelyn said, shaking her head. We just need the truth, and we need it fast. But Camilla knew that truth had become a dangerous game. As much as she wanted to believe Evelyn, the thought of involving the authorities, of exposing everything, scared her more than anything. Could she really risk it all for the sake of justice? After a few minutes of silence, Camilla turned toward the files once more. Her fingers hovered over the folder containing the most incriminating documents. Then, her gaze fell upon something hidden behind a stack of papers, another folder, one she hadn't noticed before. With trembling hands, she opened it, her heart racing. What she saw made her stomach churn. These weren't just financial papers. They were darker, more disturbing. Deals with criminals, organized crime figures, people Camilla had heard about but never imagined her father would be involved with. Bribery. Corruption. And then, the encrypted document. Her breath caught. A name was hidden within the encryption, a name that sent a chill down her spine. Marcus. He had been part of this. He had betrayed her. Marcus, she whispered, her mind reeling. He had been playing both sides all along. Evelyn came over, her eyes wide with fear. What is it? What did you find? It's him, Camilla said quietly. He's been involved. He's the one who helped hide all of this. Evelyn recoiled. But I thought. You thought he was helping me, Camilla said, her voice cold. But he wasn't. He's been working against me. Against us. Camilla stood there, stunned by the realization. Her whole world was unraveling, and every person she thought she could trust had their own agenda. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her out of her thoughts. She glanced at it, Marcus. She hesitated before answering. Camilla, his voice was strained. We need to talk. Your father is going to find out what you've done. You're in danger. Meet me now, before it's too late. Before she could respond, a loud crash came from the hallway. Footsteps. The door swung open. A shadowed figure stepped inside, his presence looming in the doorway. Camilla's pulse quickened as she locked eyes with the figure. It was Marcus. I knew you'd come, she muttered, her voice taut with disbelief. But this time, you won't win. Camilla sat in her car, staring at the unfamiliar building ahead. She hadn't expected this, a visit from someone who had always been a trusted family ally, someone who had stood by Victor through thick and thin. Her heart raced as she stepped out of the car and approached the door. The visitor was already inside, waiting for her. When she entered, the man stood up with a knowing look, but there was something unsettling about the way he held himself. It was almost as if he was more comfortable with the danger than she was. Camilla, he greeted her coolly, his voice betraying none of the tension in the air. I have information that could change everything. She raised an eyebrow. What kind of information? He hesitated, then took a step closer. Victor isn't as unprepared as you think. If you expose him, he has a backup plan. He secured deals with several powerful people. No matter what you do, he'll remain in control. Camilla's chest tightened as the implications of his words sank in. You're saying he's always been one step ahead? The visitor nodded. You're playing a dangerous game, Camilla. But if you go through with it, it could destroy everything. The weight of his words left her feeling uncertain. Could she really trust anyone in this world? Could she trust him? Why are you telling me this? She asked, narrowing her eyes. He shrugged, but there was a cold calculation in his eyes. Because I think you're the only one who can still win this fight. But you have to be prepared. There's more to it than you realize. Her mind raced as the man turned and left without saying another word. The warning hung in the air like a shadow, and for the first time, Camilla wasn't sure if she was in control of her own fate. Camilla had barely processed the visitor's words when she received a call from Marcus. She barely had time to answer before the voice on the other end blurted out, "Camilla, I've just learned something. I need to see you." Confused and wary, she agreed to meet him at a nearby cafe, but as she walked through the door, she didn't expect what would happen next. Evelyn, her own sister, was there. Sitting at the table, her back straight, eyes downcast. Camilla's heart skipped a beat. What was Evelyn doing here? As Camilla sat down, she could see that her sister was struggling with something that gnawed at her insides. There was a tension in the air that neither of them could ignore. I never thought I'd see the day we'd be in this situation, Evelyn whispered, staring at the table. But I've been talking to Dad. And I can't deny it anymore. I'm part of it. The words hit Camilla like a punch to the gut. What do you mean? She asked, barely able to hide the anger in her voice. I'm not innocent, Evelyn confessed. I've been trying to protect the family. Trying to protect myself. Her voice cracked. But you're right. I've been hiding the truth. And now I'm afraid it's too late. Camilla's mind spun as she processed Evelyn's words. Betrayal. Her own sister had been keeping secrets from her all along. For years, Camilla had believed they were on the same side, but Evelyn's confession shattered that illusion. I did what I had to do to survive, Evelyn continued, her voice soft with guilt. But I can't keep living in denial. I've been in contact with the police. They've been tracking Dad's every move. But they need evidence. Real evidence. You have to expose him, Camilla. The weight of Evelyn's words hung in the air. Camilla felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and frustration. She didn't know if she could ever trust her sister again. But Evelyn was right about one thing, the police couldn't act without evidence. And she had the pieces she needed. Then let's do it, Camilla said firmly. Let's take him down. Later, as they sat in the office with the files they had stolen from the lawyer's office, Camilla flipped through the documents with shaking hands. It all started to fall into place. Victor's financial dealings, the money laundering, the connections to organized crime, it was worse than she ever imagined. As she dug deeper, she found something that made her stop cold. There was an encrypted file that hadn't been there before. A file with Marcus's name on it. But when she opened it, her heart sank. The encryption wasn't the only thing that had been tampered with. Inside, there was a new name, someone from her father's inner circle. Someone who had been working against her all along. Marcus. She couldn't believe it. The man who had been her confidant, her ally, was just another pawn in this twisted game. She had trusted him, believed in him. But now, everything she thought she knew about him seemed like a lie. Her phone buzzed again, Marcus, calling once more. She almost didn't want to answer, but something told her she had to. Camilla, I know what you've found, Marcus said, his voice urgent. We need to meet. There's more to this than you realize. When Camilla met Marcus at the designated location, she was ready for answers. But the answers she got only made everything worse. He admitted to being part of the conspiracy, but claimed it was for a greater good. He was working with the authorities, trying to bring her father down from the inside. I never wanted to hurt you, he said. I tried to protect you, but I didn't know how deep the corruption went. And now I'm stuck. We're all stuck. Marcus's words left her confused. Should she trust him, or was this just another layer of the deception? Camilla, he continued, I can help you, but we have to do this carefully. There's an investigator who's been working on this. If we can get to him before your father's men do, we can take him down. But just as she was about to make her decision, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed behind them. Someone was watching them. Camilla turned, her heart pounding in her chest. It was Victor. And he wasn't alone. The room was quiet, the air thick with tension as Camilla sat at the table, the weight of everything that had transpired pressing heavily on her shoulders. It had been days since Victor's arrest, and the news had spread like wildfire. His empire was crumbling, and the family's secrets were exposed for the world to see. For a moment, Camilla felt a strange sense of relief. But the aftermath was not as clear-cut as she had hoped. She walked through the house, her steps slow, each room filled with reminders of the life she used to know. The remnants of Victor's reign were scattered in every corner, and for a brief second, it felt like the walls themselves were closing in on her. The family business was in chaos, the foundation of everything they had built was cracking, and in the midst of it all, Camilla couldn't help but feel guilty. Was this victory worth the cost? Evelyn's absence weighed heavily on her mind. Camilla's sister had been a silent partner in Victor's game for years. Now, despite all the chaos, Evelyn was nowhere to be found, avoiding her calls and messages. Was she still loyal to their father? Or was she in hiding, scared of the truth coming out? As Camilla sat alone in the quiet house, her phone buzzed. It was Evelyn. Camilla hesitated, the bitterness still fresh, but answered anyway. Camilla, I know we've had our differences, but I can't let this go on anymore. Evelyn's voice wavered, uncertainty filling the silence between them. I see now that what you did. It was the right thing. Camilla's heart fluttered, but she couldn't shake the doubt that lingered. And you're not still hiding behind Dad's lies? No, Evelyn replied, her voice stronger now. I've been talking to people who can help us rebuild what's left. The family, the reputation. There's a chance, but we need to fix it together. You and me. The words hung in the air. Camilla didn't know if she could fully trust Evelyn again, but for the first time, her sister seemed sincere. I don't know, Evelyn. I've already done so much damage, and I don't want to keep playing his game. I get it. But we can't let it all fall apart. We have to decide if we're willing to fight for what's left. Camilla took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the phone. She wasn't sure if she was ready to forgive, but she knew that this was the only way to move forward, whether she wanted to or not. The following days were filled with meetings, phone calls, and late-night conversations. The world was changing, and so was Camilla. She was rebuilding something real, and it wasn't just her father's empire that needed fixing, but her own fractured self. As the pieces of her life began to settle into place, she couldn't help but feel a sense of uncertainty. She was free now, but freedom came with its own set of consequences. One evening, as she sat with Marcus in the quiet of her living room, she found herself reflecting on the past, the choices she had made, and the path ahead. I can't deny it anymore, she said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. I've lost so much, Marcus. The business, my family's trust, and now it's just me. I'm not sure I'm strong enough to carry it all. Marcus looked at her, his eyes soft with understanding. Camilla, you've already carried it all. This fight, it's yours now. But that doesn't mean you have to fight it alone. I know, she replied quietly, her voice full of determination. But I have to do this my way. I can't rely on anyone else anymore. Marcus smiled, his expression warm. Then let's make sure you're not alone, no matter what. With each passing day, Camilla's resolve grew stronger. The family's empire was shattered, and the truth was now out in the open. The police were investigating, and her father's associates were scrambling to cover their tracks. But Camilla was done hiding behind the shadows. She would rebuild, starting from the ground up, and this time, she wouldn't be doing it for anyone but herself. Camilla's decision to step away from Marcus's offer was one of the hardest choices she'd ever made. There was something liberating about the idea of starting fresh, but deep down, she knew that her journey had to be about more than running away. It was about taking responsibility, even if that meant facing the consequences of her actions. She reached out to a few key people, those who still believed in her vision, who were willing to help her rebuild what her father had destroyed. Slowly but surely, the pieces started to fall into place. It wasn't easy. There were obstacles at every turn. Skeptics, enemies, and doubts at every corner. But as Camilla worked, she realized something: this was her fight, and she had already come further than she ever imagined. Days passed, and just when Camilla thought she was on the verge of truly moving forward, an unexpected message arrived. The sender was anonymous, but the contents were far from innocent. It was a simple message, with a file attached, and it made her blood run cold. The file contained new information that could unravel everything she'd worked for. Someone who had disappeared during the chaos of the past weeks had resurfaced with damning evidence. The message was clear: the battle was far from over. Camilla sat in silence, staring at the screen. The choice lay before her: should she follow this new lead, risking everything she had built, or leave the past behind and move on with her life? The decision was hers to make. Camilla sat by the window, the weight of her choices heavy on her shoulders. The world outside had changed, and so had she. The truth about her father's empire had been exposed, and his grip on the family was finally broken. But as she stared out at the city, she couldn't help but feel a deep, aching emptiness inside her. She had fought for this moment, fought to tear down the lies that had surrounded her for so long, but now, in the aftermath, she was left with the cost. Her family was fractured, her relationships strained, and she was haunted by the people she had lost along the way. Evelyn, the sister she had once trusted, now felt like a stranger. Even Marcus, her ally in this journey, had become a figure clouded in suspicion. Camilla had always known the price of fighting for the truth, but the reality of it was harder than she had anticipated. She had stood up for what was right, but in doing so, she had lost so much. As the silence in the room stretched on, Camilla reflected on the journey that had led her here. She had confronted her father, exposed his corruption, and in the process, torn apart the life she had known. The victory should have felt sweeter, but instead, it tasted of ashes. The price of exposing the truth was steep, and it was more than just the fall of Victor Sharp. It was the loss of her own identity, her own place within the family, that weighed the heaviest on her heart. The family had gathered for what could only be described as a reckoning. With Victor exposed, the empire he had built was collapsing, and now, the remaining family members had to face the consequences of Camilla's actions. She had expected resistance, but nothing could have prepared her for the confrontation that awaited. Evelyn was the first to speak, her voice trembling as she faced Camilla. "I didn't want to believe it," she whispered, her eyes filled with guilt. "I thought you were wrong, but I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. Camilla's heart sank as Evelyn's words hit her like a ton of bricks. "You knew," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You knew about all of it, the corruption, the lies, and you stayed silent." Evelyn flinched at the accusation. "I had no choice," she cried. "I stayed quiet because I was afraid. Afraid of losing everything. Of losing you. You have to understand, Camilla." The words burned in Camilla's chest. "You let him destroy everything. You let him destroy us. And now you want me to forgive you?" "I didn't want any of this," Evelyn said, her voice breaking. "But I couldn't leave. I couldn't betray the family. Until now." The betrayal felt like a knife to Camilla's heart. She had trusted Evelyn, had thought that they could face this together. But now, the sister she had once leaned on was just another piece of the puzzle that had broken her life apart. "I did this for us," Evelyn continued, her voice soft. "I thought I was protecting us. And now, we're all left with nothing." "Nothing but the truth," Camilla said coldly, her heart heavy with the weight of it all. "The truth is all I have left." Later that evening, Marcus arrived, his expression grim. "I have something to offer," he said, sitting down across from Camilla. "I can help you start fresh. I've got the resources, the connections. You don't need to keep carrying the burden of this family's legacy." For a moment, Camilla considered it. The idea of leaving everything behind, of starting anew without the weight of her family's sins holding her back, was tempting. But then, Marcus dropped a bombshell that shook her to her core. "I've been hiding something from you," Marcus confessed. "I knew more than I let on about your family's dealings. I knew about the money laundering, the corruption. And I used that knowledge to benefit myself. But I never wanted you to get hurt." Camilla's breath caught in her throat as the realization hit her like a freight train. "You knew?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "All this time?" Marcus's eyes softened. "I didn't want this for you, Camilla. I thought I could protect you, but I see now that I was wrong." The betrayal cut deeper than she ever thought it could. She had trusted Marcus, relied on him more than anyone. And now, he, too, had been part of the deception. The lies were endless, and Camilla's heart felt hollow. How could she trust anyone now? "I thought I could fight this with you," she said, her voice trembling. "But now I don't know what to believe." Marcus looked at her, regret clear in his eyes. "I'm sorry. But if you want to leave this all behind, I'll help you. I'll support you." But Camilla wasn't sure anymore. She didn't know who she could trust, and she wasn't sure if she could forgive him. Her future felt uncertain, her path unclear. Despite everything, Camilla knew what she had to do. The decision wasn't easy, but it was clear now. She couldn't run away. She couldn't leave the family legacy in ruins without doing everything she could to fix it. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, standing up. "I'm going to take responsibility. For everything." Marcus's expression faltered, but he nodded. "Are you sure?" "I've already lost too much," Camilla replied, her voice steady. "I can't run anymore. I have to rebuild. For me. For the family. For everything that's left." As Camilla set her plan into motion, a new realization hit her. Victor's empire might have crumbled, but there was still something hidden, something worth fighting for. She'd uncovered secrets in her father's financial dealings, a hidden fortune that could help her rebuild what had been destroyed. But it was tangled up with people she couldn't trust. The past had left its mark, and the future was uncertain. Before she could take action, an unexpected message arrived. It was from someone she hadn't heard from in weeks, someone she thought had disappeared during the chaos. The message contained new information that threatened to undo everything she had worked for. The message was clear: someone was still playing the game. Someone was still working against her. Camilla stood there, her heart racing. The road ahead was unclear, but she knew one thing for sure: she was done running. She would confront the truth, no matter the cost. But the question remained: could she face it alone? The weight of the past few days pressed down on Camilla as she walked through the empty halls of her family's estate. The air felt different now, almost suffocating. The truths she had fought to expose were out in the open, but at what cost? Her father's empire lay in ruins, and the wreckage was more than just financial. The family she had once known was fractured beyond repair. As she passed the once grandiose paintings that adorned the walls, now seemingly tainted by the memories of betrayal, Camilla couldn't shake the feeling of loss. She had fought to tear down the lies, to bring justice, but in doing so, she had lost more than she ever thought possible. Her relationships, her family, had shattered, and no amount of truth could piece them back together. The phone buzzed in her hand, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Evelyn. Her sister, the one person Camilla had believed might stand by her, was finally acknowledging what had happened. But was it too little, too late? She opened the message. "Camilla, I know you've been hurt, and I don't know if I can make it right, but I want you to know I'm here. If you'll let me." Camilla let the phone slip from her hand onto the marble floor with a dull thud. She had seen the pain in Evelyn's eyes, heard her regret, but the truth was, it didn't change anything. Her sister had been complicit in this family's lies for too long, and now, she wanted redemption. But was it truly redemption, or just another attempt to save herself? Later that afternoon, Camilla sat across from Marcus, the man who had once been her ally, now the source of yet another betrayal. He had come to her, his face pale with the weight of the confession he was about to make. His guilt was palpable, but it didn't make the truth any easier to swallow. "I should have told you sooner," Marcus said, his voice tight. "I was involved. I knew more than I let on. Your family's dealings weren't just something I stumbled upon, they were part of a much larger web. And I covered it up. For my own reasons." Camilla's eyes narrowed, disbelief swirling in her chest. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you tell me the full truth when I needed it most?" "I didn't want to hurt you," he said quietly. "But I couldn't keep lying to you either." Marcus paused, taking a deep breath. "There's more," he continued. "Someone from your family's past, someone you've been fighting. I helped cover up their involvement. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now I was just part of the problem." Her stomach churned. The weight of his confession hit her like a freight train. It wasn't just Victor who had betrayed her, it was Marcus, too. The man she had trusted with everything, the one person who had promised to stand by her, was just as complicit in the lies that had defined her family. "I don't know if I can trust you anymore," she said, her voice breaking. "How can I?" Marcus looked at her with pleading eyes, his voice shaking. "I can help you. I want to help you. Please, let me make this right." But how could she? How could she trust him again when everything he had been involved in had led to this moment of pain and betrayal? She couldn't, not yet. Not after everything. The final confrontation was inevitable. With the truth exposed and the family's empire crumbling, Camilla found herself standing before the remaining members of her family, Victor, Evelyn, and Oliver. They all had their own reactions to the revelations, but the tension in the room was suffocating. Victor was the first to speak, his voice cold, calculating. "You think you've won, don't you?" he said, his eyes narrowing. "You think that exposing me will change anything? The family business? It's mine. It always will be." Camilla stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "Not anymore. It's mine now. I will rebuild, but it won't be on the backs of lies. It won't be on the blood of people you've destroyed." Her voice rang out with authority, something she hadn't known she possessed until now. The years of living in her father's shadow, the constant manipulation, the betrayals, it all led to this moment. The moment when she took control of her own future. "You're a fool if you think you can undo the damage you've done," Victor spat, but Camilla didn't flinch. She wasn't afraid anymore. "Maybe," she replied, "but I'll be damned if I let you keep destroying everything. You will face the consequences of your actions, and I will take the reins of this family. I won't just tear it down, I'll rebuild it from the ground up." The family was left in shock, the weight of Camilla's words hanging in the air. But as Evelyn stepped forward, her voice hesitant, she shocked Camilla once more. "I'm leaving," Evelyn said, her words trembling. "I can't stay here. I can't be part of this anymore. I'm walking away from it all." Camilla's heart twisted. Part of her wanted to reach out, to beg her sister to stay, to work together to fix what had been broken. But another part of her understood. Evelyn had suffered just as much as Camilla, and now she was choosing to step away from the toxicity that had defined their family for so long. "I'm sorry," Evelyn whispered. "But I need to do this for me. For us." Camilla watched her sister walk away, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. There was sadness, yes, but there was also a strange sense of relief. At least Evelyn was choosing to live her own life, even if it meant leaving everything behind. Just as Camilla thought she might finally find peace, a new threat emerged. A shadow from the past, a figure she thought she had left behind, reappeared. An anonymous message flashed across her phone screen. "You may have won the battle, but the war is far from over." Camilla froze, her heart pounding. The message was cryptic, but it carried a warning that sent chills down her spine. She couldn't afford to ignore it. The fight was far from over, and just when she thought she was free, the past came crashing back. As the realization sank in, Camilla knew she couldn't stop now. The stakes had been raised, and there was more to uncover. She was no longer running from the truth, she was facing it head-on. But the cost? That was something she couldn't yet understand. Camilla stood before the mirror, the reflection staring back at her was a stranger, yet undeniably familiar. Her eyes had seen things that no one should have to endure, but in those eyes, there was a new strength, one forged in the fires of pain and sacrifice. The woman she saw before her was no longer the frightened daughter of a powerful man. She had transformed, evolved, and in the process, lost parts of herself that she would never get back. But there was something more. Something unspoken. The weight of her journey had been exhausting, every decision a battleground, every step forward a challenge. The house that had once been filled with secrets and lies now stood silent, echoing only the remnants of the past. She couldn't say she was proud of all that had happened, but there was no turning back. The chaos, the betrayal, the years of manipulation, those chapters were closed. Now, it was time for her to rewrite her future. As she moved through the house, each photograph, each family heirloom, felt like an anchor to a life she could never return to. Her hand brushed against an old picture of her and Evelyn, a time when the world seemed so much simpler. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them away. The pain of what had been lost was real, but it was nothing compared to the pain of living in the shadows of someone else's control. She'd let go of so much, and in the process, had found something else, something she could claim as her own. The sun dipped below the horizon as Camilla stood at the gates of the estate, looking out at the road ahead. This place, so full of memories, was no longer her prison. She had taken the first steps toward leaving the past behind. But even as she stood there, a sense of unease lingered. The phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw the name Evelyn. "Camilla, I know things are broken between us, but I want to make it right. I want to help." Camilla stared at the screen, her heart heavy. Could she trust Evelyn? Could she forgive her for all the lies, for the complicity that had kept her bound to their father's legacy? She wasn't sure. But the offer of help, the possibility of healing, pulled at her. Just as she was about to reply, a familiar voice echoed from behind her. "Camilla." She turned to find Marcus standing at the gate, a hesitant look on his face. His expression was filled with something softer than the hardened businessman she'd known. He stepped forward slowly, his hands held up in a gesture of peace. "I know I've made mistakes," he said quietly. "But I want you to know I never meant to hurt you. I want to help you start over. I can give you everything you need, resources, connections. Together, we can make sure your father's empire isn't just torn down. We can rebuild it, but this time it'll be on your terms. You'll have the future you've always wanted." The offer hung in the air, heavy with promise, but also fraught with its own dangers. Camilla could feel the weight of it pressing on her chest. She had fought so hard for independence. She had fought for a future where she wasn't beholden to anyone. And here was Marcus, offering her a way back into a world she had just fought to escape. Was this another trap? Or was it truly a chance for something new? Before she could speak, the sound of footsteps interrupted. Evelyn appeared at her side, a strained smile on her face. "I wasn't sure if you'd be here," Evelyn said softly, her eyes meeting Camilla's. "But I needed to see you. I've made so many mistakes, but I'm ready to try. If you'll let me." Camilla looked from Marcus to Evelyn, torn between two paths. The road to the past, with all its complications, or the road to an uncertain future. Her heart raced as she realized that, for the first time in years, she had control over what came next. The next day, Camilla stood in front of the old family business, her father's legacy. The once imposing building now seemed insignificant in the light of her newfound determination. It had been a source of pain, of lies and betrayal, but now, it was just a building, a symbol of a life she was ready to leave behind. As she walked through the door, she was greeted by the staff who had remained loyal, those who believed in the new vision she would bring. Camilla didn't need to say much, they could see it in her eyes. This was no longer her father's business. This was hers. With a deep breath, she sat at the head of the table, the weight of the decision she would soon make pressing on her. There were no illusions now. The past was behind her, and the future was hers to shape. There were risks, more challenges ahead, but she was ready for them. She didn't need Marcus's resources, nor Evelyn's protection. She would find her own way. But she would also take the time to heal, to rebuild relationships in her own way, on her own terms. She didn't need their approval or their forgiveness. She had given up enough of herself to know that the only person she truly needed was herself. As she took the first step toward this new future, a sense of peace settled over her. She had fought for this moment, fought for the right to define her own life, and now it was hers. The road ahead wasn't certain, but for the first time in a long time, Camilla was ready to walk it. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was an anonymous message. The past will always find a way back. Camilla took a deep breath and looked at the horizon. It wasn't over. But this time, she was in control. She smiled.